Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today, I have the joy of recapping my Lake Champlain disaster. I honestly, guys, this is one of the biggest screw ups I've had in my fishing career that I can recall. It's all 2020 at this point, but the reality is I should have gone out and fished smallmouth the entire event, gone to what I considered my best smallmouth area, and come out of there with a good check and potentially even a much higher finish. But this is what happened. So in practice, I quickly found a couple of areas that had decent smallmouth in them. I thought I could catch 15 to 17 pounds if I fished those areas throughout the day. But I never saw a fish that was over maybe 3 3/4 pounds, maybe pushing 4 pounds. I didn't weigh them at that point, uh, but I quickly located a couple areas I felt good about. And then I kind of ended up on a wild goose chase. I found some milfoil that had some good fish in it. Uh, and I flipped up a couple of nice quality bass. I had one that was probably, I didn't weigh them. They're 3.5 to 4 pounds. And I got a bunch of bites and it felt really good. I love to flip milfoil. It's one of those things that I really think I'm good at. And I also know that on a place like Lake Champlain or any other lake in the North Country, it can be a way to put a very good bag in the boat quickly. I was sharing some information with my roommate, Chris Grove. He was also doing something similar and had seen some very large bass. He came in contact with two 6 pound class fish that he did not catch. He shook one off and saw another one. So I knew I was in an area that had some really big fish. And the largemouth that I was catching were some of the fattest largemouth I've ever seen. So it was one of those things where I knew if I could catch like an 18-inch bass, you're talking 4.5 plus pounds. Like they were the right quality fish. And I was not getting a ton of smallmouth bites, but again, I didn't see any huge fish, and I thought I was kind of maybe topping out at 17 pounds. And that's one of those things you just don't know unless you sit there and really whack on the fish in practice. And you don't want to do that. And I didn't want to do it in this case because Lake Champlain is such a large lake. We only have 2 days of practice. So I wanted to keep moving and finding as many areas as I could. And that was one of the problems I ran into with the largemouth. The largemouth, in order to find the locations where the fish were at in the milfoil, you had to fish it. And it's fishing grass is an extremely slow process. So I ended up spending over half of my practice looking for largemouth because every time I found the right conditions, I'd get bit, and I just felt like they were good quality bites. So when the tournament rolled around, that's what I rolled with on day one. Every time I've been to Lake Champlain, I have fished smallmouth and I've cashed checks in almost every event. And honestly, guys, I cashed a small check in this event, so I got out of this one all right. But I'm considering it a disaster because the first day did not go well. I ended up fishing over half the day for largemouth, and I only had a handful. I weighed 3 largemouth that day, but I didn't have any big bite. I had one that was maybe 3 1/4. I had another one that was 2 3/4, and one that was 2.5. And I caught all of those by flipping a Berkeley Pit Boss in a green pumpkin color with a 3/4 ounce weight, tungsten weight. I was just flipping it on heavy braid. I had some X5 50-pound braided line. So it was just one of those things where I was just flipping around in the milfoil, hoping to get a big bite. It never happened, and we had a strong wind that day. So I didn't give myself enough time to fish smallmouth, and I didn't really get to fish my primary area nearly as well as I would have liked. And I had another area that was significantly farther away that I never went to because it was the wrong direction on, the short amount of time I had left to fish. I was able to catch a 3.5 pound smallmouth, another one that was around 3. So I had 14.5 pounds when I went in. I had 4 fish that were roughly 3 pounds, and I had a 2.5. During this tournament, that was not good. I was in 100, almost 120th place out of 160 guys. So 14.5 pounds on most lakes would be good enough to, come out of there with a decent finish. But in this case, it was not. The problem you run into on a lake like Lake Champlain is the weights are you can replicate them very easily from day to day. Meaning, if you found smallmouth that are weighing 3 1/4 pounds, you'd have about 16 1/4 pounds. the next day you probably can catch 16 1/4 again. The problem with that is you're capped off at like that 16 1/4 pound range because you just aren't with the right class of fish. Well, I went to my area and fished smallmouth the second day. I said I'm gonna commit to it fully. I felt like it was my best way to catch at least, to catch 17 pounds, which would have moved me up and potentially given me a shot at a small check. I really thought I'd need about 18 1/2 pounds, which is what it came down to. But I figured I'd start on the smallmouth, and my plan was if I could catch 17 pounds, I would switch over to the largemouth and see if I could come in contact with a 5 or 6 pound class largemouth, which would then get me up into that 19 plus pound bag range. So I went to my smallmouth area, and I quickly realized two things. First, I caught one that was almost 4 pounds within the first 15 minutes. And second, I had 4 or 5 other boats around me, and I didn't know exactly what they had, but I knew they all had good bags. And in hindsight, they all had 18 to 20 pounds the first day. And as you fish these areas, it was a big flat. You'll come in contact with a guy here and there. And what I quickly realized is all of these guys said, that the first day they were catching twice as many fish as they caught on the second day, and it had gotten a little tougher. I still thought it was pretty easy, and I ended up catching by about 11, I think 11 o'clock, I had about 17 1/2 pounds. So what I knew is they all the quality was there, and I still had at that point about 4 hours to fish. So I had a decision to make. Should I try to upgrade with smallmouth, or should I run to the largemouth stuff? I decided to stick with the smallmouth for a couple of reasons. One, the wind had kicked up, and I knew, I think at that point I had one fish that was a little over 3 pounds. So I knew if I could get another like 3 1/2 pound class fish, I could get up into that 18 pound range, and that would put me really close to getting a small check, which is a big deal at this point. I at least wanted to make some money back. A small check is $5,000. So that's something I definitely wanted to make. The second thing was the wind had kicked up, and I didn't want to make a long boat ride to my largemouth area because you don't want to put those smallmouth through a bunch of beating, at which point you potentially could end up with a dead fish penalty if one of the smallmouth didn't make it. So I figured I would camp out on smallmouth because the 1/2 pound penalty or a 1/4 pound penalty in this tournament could be like 10 places. That's how tight the weights are. So I ended up sticking it out for smallmouth and cold up several times, and I ended up having 3 fish that were just under 4 pounds and 2 fish that were a little over 3 1/2 pounds. They were almost 3 3/4 pounds, and I ended up having 19 pounds even for the day, which was good enough to shoot me from like 120th up into I think 57th place. And I got a $5,500 check, 1 ounce away from a $10,000 check, which was really disappointing because on day one, I actually had one of the bass spit up a 9-inch yellow perch, which was well over an ounce. So I actually would have had that fish been able to keep that down in the live well. But that is what it is. So I came up a little short. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. First, I caught all the smallmouth on a drop shot with a Berkeley Max Scent flatworm. Honestly, it's like the best drop shot bait you can use, in my opinion. But I did find a couple of things. When we had sunny conditions, the green pumpkin color, any version of the green pumpkin was a absolute must. As soon as we got cloud cover, the green pumpkin died off a little bit, but then I quickly found that the shad colored colors that I was using, so I was throwing natural shiner, natural shiner or natural shad, I think it's called, and the other was brownback, which are both very much like a alewife colored bait or a bait fish colored bait. As soon as we get the cloud cover, that was the color they wanted. And then, I'd go through these periods where we'd have sun, then an hour of clouds, then an hour of sun, hour of clouds. And as soon as I'd make that switch back and forth to the other color, it was like lights out. I mean, I would catch every fish I saw using the active target. But if I was using the wrong color under the wrong conditions, I would not get bit. So it's something to point out that the color really did matter in this case based on whether we had sun or not. So that was huge. Everyone right now is using a forward-facing sonar technology, and in a smallmouth event like this, it's if it feels bad to say, but if you're not using it, you're not going to be able to compete at this top level. I mean, the guys are making very precise casts. I had several periods on the second day where I went like 6 for 6, 6 casts in a row where I caught the fish that I saw, and it's just because I'm literally scanning and making a cast for the fish that I see. I know it's kind of like cheating. It is cheating. I mean, it's not kind of, it really is cheating. It gives the advantage to the angler. But in a situation like this, guys, whether you like it or not, I have to be using it if I want to be competitive. And it's an amazing tool during these conditions. So it's something that I really feel mixed on, because I do think that it takes away a lot of the actual fishing aspect of the sport. But it is what I was doing. And yeah, so I really am very bitter after this tournament because I consider myself a very good smallmouth fisherman. And in hindsight, the area that I had found, the area that I liked the best was producing 18 to 20 pound bags for the guys that were fishing it. Several guys, came out of there with really high finishes, and I feel like I should have been one of them had I made the right decision to avoid the largemouth and just fish the smallmouth. But under the circumstances, I was in a position where I had nothing to lose. I might have had an outside shot of making the championship if I won the tournament. And my thought process was my best way at a 20+ pound bag is to catch those largemouth that I saw in practice, and they disappeared on day one. I don't know where they went. I don't know what happened. The conditions were relatively the same, except there was a strong wind blowing into that area. So maybe it flushed it around and the bait fish moved, or they moved, and I just wasn't able to relocate them, but it put me behind the 8 ball. In hindsight, had I gone smallmouth fishing, I feel extremely confident I would have come out of there with a good high finish and a solid $10,000+ check. So I'm pretty disappointed in that, but it's a lesson learned. It's it is what it is. I mean, that's fishing. You make the wrong decision, you get burned sometimes. And in this case, I got burned, but I salvaged day 2 enough to at least come out of there with some money in my pocket, which is always good. Anyways, guys, I'm jealous of you that are getting to fish the Toyota event here coming up in a couple of days on Lake Champlain. It's a beautiful lake full of fish. If you've never been there before, I highly recommend it because it truly is a fishery that is just so pristine and beautiful with the mountains surrounding it. It does get rough. It does get rough, and it likes to eat boats. But if you can find some fish, you can have a full day of catching fish. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. Learn from my mistakes, and stay tuned. We'll have another video coming out tomorrow. That's my last tournament for the year, I think, at least at the national level. Hank and Duke and I have been fishing local Wednesday nighters. I think we fished 2 this year right before Champlain. We won both of them, so I was thinking maybe I'll start videotaping those and showing the highlights, because Hank is on me every day about whether there's a nightly tournament that night. So I'm sure we'll fish some more over the next couple of months. So stay tuned for those if that's what you're looking for. Otherwise, guys, we'll still have our daily videos with tips and tricks and hacks and all different stuff. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have more coming for you.